Happy Friday, everyone. It is so nice to be here and talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is anxiety and specifically separation anxiety, which may sound weird that it's one of my favorite things, but it's something that I know a lot about, and it's something that really we have good treatment and we have good strategies for. So it's something that is super rewarding to work with families when separation anxiety is at play. Now, I am a child psychologist, I am a licensed psychologist. So I feel like I need to throw in a little bit of a disclaimer that I'll ask you guys if you have any questions at the end, but it's a little different being a psychologist versus like a parent coach. Um, Try to ask questions that are more general, because if you ask, this is what's going on with my child and it's very specific, it could be construed as like psychotherapy or psychological treatment. So just a disclaimer, this is all for educational purposes only, and hopefully it's very helpful for you. But this is not in any way a form of psychological treatment for you or your child. And thank you, Augie, for hosting me. Okay, so a little of my background. I am originally from Louisiana, but I married a guy in the military, so we have moved around a bit. I have two daughters, Nora and Charlie. They are 7 and 3, and we have dealt with some separation anxiety. So it's something that I've dealt with personally, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about kind of the personal and professional ways that I've dealt with anxiety, and that we've really kind of made a lot of progress. So I am a licensed psychologist. I have a PhD in school psychology, and I did a clinical child psychology fellowship. I am licensed in Florida, which is where we live now. And I also have a SIPACT authorization, which is this really cool sort of like compact that some states have, 42 states, to where we can provide telehealth services to people that are in different states, which is super wonderful because number one, there are not enough mental health professionals for the people that we have, especially in some states and in some rural areas. And also, mental health can be very specialized, and sometimes there is not the therapist that you need in your area. So SIPACT is wonderful. If you need a therapist, it is a great way to access kind of people who serve people in different areas, but have a more specific niche if that's something you're looking for. So anxiety and me, I was a super anxious kid. I mean, so anxious. I also had ADHD, which I didn't know about then, but I knew that I was very anxious. It was something that sometimes I kind of tried to hide in a way, but it was kind of hard to hide too, because I remember, melting down if my parents wouldn't be like the first in the carpool line. I remember having worries of that there would be a fire in our house and I was on the second floor. I remember, not being able to sleep at night. But I don't think I maybe realized that it was not normal until becoming a child psychologist. I'm one of those people who was like, oh, I had a great normal childhood, and I can help kids who do struggle. Unknowingly, I was as one of those kids. So that's kind of my story, and like many of, I think, the moms of my generation had to overcome it and figure it out myself. Because South Louisiana, you don't go to therapy. I don't really know if my parents kind of knew what was going on, or how to help. And now it's wonderful being in a position of being able to help families and being able to help kids in a way that's so much quicker than all of the suffering and struggling that goes on for these kids who have anxiety. So that's me. But my kids have struggled with some separation anxiety as well. And some separation anxiety is normal, which we'll talk about. But we moved, some people are coming in. We moved to Japan when my daughters were ages 4 and 9 months old. But that was a huge transition for our family, as you can imagine. So much excitement, but then we get there and it's meltdown city. Everything is different. It was, from going to the grocery store and not knowing how to buy groceries to trying to figure out military life, which we really hadn't been in before. It was huge. And my 4 year old started really struggling with separation anxiety, probably within the first month she started school. It was, she didn't want to go to school. She hated school. And then it got to the point where I started being concerned because we're going to, even in our house, and she would want me to follow her upstairs or downstairs or let her know when I was going somewhere, which I knew was out of the realm of quote unquote normal. But we had just gone through a transition and I was the child psychologist of the island. I was the one who treated the military families. So, although I knew how to treat children, this was my own kid. One, I can't do therapy for her, right? That's not ethical. And I was that person. So there were therapists, but anxiety is a little tricky, and you do have to really know how to treat it, or it could either not work or it could just kind of stay the same if you just take a kid in and you talk to them. So I knew I had to do something. So I decided to learn more about childhood anxiety. And I read a book. And if you kind of go in and get the guide that I'll talk about at the end, it will have the reference to the book, but it's by Dr. Ellie Leibovitz, who's at Yale. And it's called Breaking Free of Childhood Anxiety and OCD. And it really, I mean, it totally opened my eyes to the parents, how the parents are parenting and how that can maintain a kid's anxiety. And what I was doing was completely maintaining my own kids' anxiety. So then went on to do the trainings, which are called the space treatment, to get some more information to figure out, number one, kind of how do I parent my own kid, but how do I not just treat the kids that I'm working with, but really dive in with the parents. Okay. And so separation anxiety. So long story short with my own kids, I learned the strategies and they are, completely different children now. My second child does not have the separation anxiety that my first daughter had. My first daughter is is just thriving. She's running away from me. She's begging to go sleep at kids' houses. It's really life changing, and that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. And there were other anxieties as well, but today we're going to talk about separation anxiety. So, just a general overview: separation anxiety is when our kids feel really anxious and feel afraid because they're separating from us, right? And this normally starts in infancy, older babies to through toddlerhood. Some is normal. Sometimes it shows more when they get into the twos and threes, if that's the first time that they've experienced separation. So that can be very common and very normal, right? We see this with all kids because it's something that's different and they've not experienced. And when we haven't experienced something, it's scary, right? So for kids to get through the separation anxiety, they do have to experience separations, right? And that's why typically kids go through these periods when they're young and then they have these separations, they're successful, and then the anxiety goes away and they're able to separate, go to school, go to activities, go to friends' houses, have sleepovers, parents leave for trips, and that's normal. They're able to handle that. But sometimes it becomes a problem, right? And sometimes kids are not in what is the realm of, you know, typical development. It's becoming a problem and it's really impairing both the child and the family, including siblings, including parents, including relatives, because, they can't go to grandma's house because mom has to be with them all the time, or dad can't drop them off at school, so mom always has to go, or mom can't go, play one on one with her other kid because she has to be within view of the child that has anxiety. So it's very impactful within the whole family system. These are some signs that it may be problematic. First off, I'll say if you feel like it's a problem, it very well may be, right? We are able to see a lot of other children and kind of determine, hey, is what my child's doing similar to what they're doing, right? So if you're bringing your kid for the first time to preschool, you're going to see other kids crying. You just will. And you may know, okay, like that's what the other kids are doing too. But if, by week 3 of preschool, no other children are crying and your child's still crying, that may be an indicator that it's not within that normal development anymore and something is maintaining that anxiety. Not to say you're causing your kids anxiety, but something that's going on in the environment is keeping that anxiety around. It's making the kid feel like the child needs to be anxious because it's dangerous to be away from mom or dad or any caregiver. So other signs that it could be problematic. So if your child is experiencing symptoms like stomach aches or headaches, right? So sometimes people think, oh man, my kids, they just say they have a stomach ache anytime they get out of anything. And in reality, they may actually have a stomach ache because our minds and our bodies are extremely connected. If you think of getting butterflies, if you think of, you're stressed out and you have a headache, that connection is very strong. And so our kids do actually experience these things, which can make it difficult when they feel crummy and you have to be like, okay, bye. They may be calling or texting frequently. So they may be going to the office at school and asking to call you. They may be going to the nurse and calling you. They may be with one parent and needing to check in on you frequently for kind of no reason, just to kind of make sure that you're there. You may be answering the phone quickly because if you don't, they're not going to be okay. Visiting the nurse, they may be having difficulty sleeping, right? So you may know, okay, all the other kids that we see, they're going to sleep in their bed, they're sleeping through the night, and I'm staying in my kid's room, even though they're, capable of falling asleep on their own, and I'm having to like slither out like a snake to make sure they don't hear that I escape because they're so hyper vigilant to being apart from me. So sleeping difficulties are very common. They could be having thoughts of their parents being harmed or killed with a separation. That's pretty common when kids are older, that they really are able to have these thoughts that are related to the separation anxiety, and they're very distressing. They can be very horrible. They can be very specific of, my parents are going to be kidnapped. I heard that one recently, or they're going to get in a car accident. Just fears of very bad things happening with the separation. We see that a lot with older kids with separation anxiety. And by older, I kind of mean just like past preschool. They may be avoiding school or activities. So you may say, well, I'd love to put them in an activity, but if I can't be in the room with them, they're not going to go and dance. They're not going to do it. It's going to be a meltdown. Or you may sign them up and you may quit, or you may sign them up and they may have meltdowns every week and it's just too much. So avoiding anything. And then another sign that's problematic is that it really feels like it's impacting the family's life, the actual anxiety regarding separation. Oh, okay. So now we're going to talk about anxiety accommodations. Okay. So we know what separation anxiety is. You're all here. Okay, maybe I could use a little help with this, whether it's just very typical preschool separation anxiety or it does feel more severe. And what we know is that the research shows that 97% of parents with anxious kids are in some way accommodating. And I would say if you really looked at those 3% that are not, they probably are in some way. So this is in no way anything to make parents feel guilty, right? Anxiety accommodations are just changes that we make in our own behavior as parents to accommodate that anxiety. So it's understanding that our kid's going to freak out at dance, so we don't sign them up for dance. That's a change in our own behavior. Or it's answering the phone right away, because if you let it ring and go to voicemail, they're going to have a meltdown. Any change that we are making in our behavior that we wouldn't be doing if our kid didn't have this clear anxiety, right? It may be, providing a lot of reassurance. So it may be going to school and having, a really long conversation on the way to school about that they're going to be okay, really reassuring them and kind of over preparing them. Now, we want to prepare our kids and we want to understand they're not adults, right? Like they do need our support, but we need to give them just enough support. We don't want to give them so much support when the level of the danger is way down here, right? Because if we're telling them for 20 minutes in the car how safe they're going to be and that everything's okay. And we're really sending a message that we're not confident in their abilities to cope with it and that it really is a big deal, right? We're sending the message, we're going to sit here and talk about it for 20 minutes and tell you you're okay, but why are you going through all of this if it's not a big deal, right? It really kind of reinforces that it's scary. So again, just matching that level of support to the level of the danger. And if we are giving way too much support and way too much accommodations, slowly decreasing that, right? So that we can get our kids to a place where they're able to handle separation in a developmentally appropriate way, right? Where they're able to quickly learn that yes, separation at first may feel scary, but I have a school where I have teachers and I have friends, and there's so many fun things to distract me, and I don't even need to think about mom and dad today. So as you can see, anxiety accommodations, you've probably gotten the hint that they do maintain the kids' anxiety, right? So when we change our behavior and provide too much support, we are maintaining that anxiety. Now, anxiety occurs for many reasons, right? Again, I have been there myself. This is in no way, hey, you have caused your kid to be anxious, right? There's so many factors. There's genetics, there's other environmental factors at play. There's, transitions like moving to Japan. So there's so many things that go on that this is not, hey, you caused your kids anxiety. It's more of your kid was probably prone to some anxiety and showing anxiety, and you responded in a very typical way that parents tend to do. So this is the anxiety accommodation cycle, and this is from the book that I discussed, and it's from the SPACE treatment, which is a treatment we'll talk about at the end. So the accommodation cycle, if you look at the top, you see the distress related to the disorder. So our kids are feeling distressed, they're feeling anxious, and we see that, and we don't really like that, right? We want to protect our kids. We want our kids to kind of feel okay, right? But then there's the family accommodation. So they're distressed, and we, in some way, act on that, and we either do something or don't do something that we typically would have done if our kid wasn't anxious. What happens, and you probably have seen, and you may say, no, like, it actually works, Dr. Hannah, when I do this, you may see a short-term reduction in distress. So in the short term, these things often do help our kids feel better. So they have this distress, we do something different, and then they feel this brief sort of relief, right, of the anxiety. It feels better. But what happens is that leads to continued dependence on us, their parents, to regulate these big feelings, right? And then that leads to maintaining these symptoms. And then we just go through the cycle over and over again, right? So we're allowing our kids to escape some of these feelings in a way. So they feel this anxiety. We jump in and do something about it or don't, and they get this really big relief, right? And you've probably been in a situation where you feel really anxious about something, but then you're able to get out of it and you just feel like amazing, right? Because you were able to avoid it, right? Maybe you're in line for a roller coaster and the roller coaster breaks and you have to leave the line. And it's like, okay, I can handle this. Like now I'm good. But what happens is that feels really good in our brain. And if we escape something that makes us anxious, then we feel really good. And the next time the anxiety comes, our brain says, oh, you have to escape this. You're going to feel better. Just get away from it and you will feel better. Right. So that's kind of from their side what is happening when we accommodate the anxiety. And it may not be that they escape the situation, right? It may be that they still end up going to school, but you provided so much reassurance that it allowed them to determine that they need you for that, right? And again, when we change our behavior, our kids often see that and they see, and we're sending a message, you need me to do this for you, right? We're just giving way too much support. The danger level is, very low or negligent. And we're kind of sending mixed messages because we're saying that you're okay, but our behavior is very opposite to that. Our behavior is saying, oh man, like I really need to jump in and help you. So just some general tips, right? And this is a very brief discussion on something that I work with parents on for months, right? So this is very general, and we'll talk about maybe needing more support. But some general tips. If drop off is a difficult time, right, then make a very quick ritual and avoid lingering at these separations. And this is something that you will see all kinds of tips and advice online, and people will say you will traumatize your child if you leave them and they are crying. Do not do that. That will ruin the relationship. That is completely contrary to what we know about childhood anxiety. And if you do linger and if you do stay, you're showing them that they really need you and you are maintaining that anxiety. So if you see posts like this that are clearly just shaming and guilting and saying that we're going to traumatize our children, it's just not true. The only way that we can have our kids to overcome separation anxiety is to separate, right? And any time and any extra lingering we do in support is sending the message that they need us again to kind of escape that anxiety. Make a quick ritual. We don't want to be cold or heartless, right? We want to be warm, but we want to show them that we're confident that they can handle it, right? And if we do things like we stay at the door for longer, try to get them to calm down first, or walk them in, even though all the other parents are dropping off at the door, or stay in the car for 10 extra minutes before they go. The message we're sending is that you can't handle what these other kids are handling. This is really scary. And it really just keeps the anxiety there. It maintains that anxiety. Do a quick ritual. They will be so much better. Another thing that I discovered from my own parenting was a big mistake that I was making with my second daughter was she was very capable of walking, but I was carrying her into the building. When I stopped carrying her in, it was night and day. It was amazing the shift that I saw when I stopped carrying her in. If you really think about it, think about you're a little baby, you're or a toddler, and you're being held, or a preschooler, and you're being held by your parent. They're right there, right? They're right there with you. When they go to separate to another caregiver or to their classroom, it's a very like visual, visible difference. It's way more obvious to them than just, they're on the ground, they're walking, they see a toy, they go in, right? This is, I'm going from being carried and nurtured by mom to being possibly torn away by a teacher or kind of pushed in by mom. And that made a very big difference. And one of the accommodations we see in parents, and was kind of mine, was keeping my kids close even when they didn't really need me, right? So going to a birthday party and really making sure like they're right by me, right? Distractions can really help with this, right? If they can, bring in a toy to show their teacher, that's going to maybe take their mind just a tiny bit off the fact that they are anxious, right? Now, your school may have policies, no toys, whatever. If you work with the teacher and tell them what's going on, they can easily get the toy away 2 minutes later. But any kind of little distraction that you have can help. So that's kind of the drop off thing, and that's more of the specific. If we're talking about other separation anxieties, what we want to do is we want to decrease the accommodations, right? So we don't want to, completely tear apart what we're doing and change our kids' world, but we do want to slowly show them that they can handle more separation than they're used to, right? So that may be, when we walk around the house, we stop saying, hey, I'm going into the living room, or hey, I'm going into the bathroom, or we may start closing the door when we go to the bathroom instead of allowing them to come in with us, right? So a slow decrease in the accommodations. And to make this work, you need to pick one thing and make a plan, right? Say it's, I'm no longer going to announce that I'm around the house, right? Make a plan. Don't try to decrease everything at one time, because it's going to be really hard to stick to. And it's way better to just pick one thing, be really consistent on it, and then expand from there. So make a plan. inform them first, right? If we're changing something in our own behavior, we've been, reassuring our kid the whole way to school every single day, or we've been, sitting in the car with them before school for 10 minutes. We need to let them know that's not going to happen anymore, right? We don't want to shock their system. And kids can have these conversations and be kind of understanding. So you can inform them and say, hey, how we've been sitting in the car for 10 minutes before we walk into the building? And they say, yeah. So it feels good in the moment, but I kind of realized something. That's making your brain stuck on being scared to go inside. Because if we just go inside, you're really fine when you go in, right? And they may say, yeah, and they may not like it, right? But if we inform them and let them know what our change is going to be and that it's to help them, they normally in that moment when they're not anxious can see that logic and can say, yeah, okay, like that makes sense, right? Humor and motivation go a long way, right? So humor, doing things that are goofy, right? If your kid doesn't want to walk into school, they're used to being carried, then say, hey, what kind of animal are we going to pretend to be when we walk in today? Let them pick an animal that they're going to make you walk in as that's super goofy, right? Okay, should I be a giraffe or should I be an elephant when I go in? And don't pick elephant. Don't pick elephant. That's so embarrassing. Oh, you want me to be an elephant? Okay. And do it. And they're not even going to notice likely that you're not carrying them because they're distracted by something that's fun. And that is really helpful. I always tell my 7-year-old, you can't be laughing and afraid at the same time. So if we can make these kids laugh, it makes things so much easier. Using motivation in some way, right? Hey, I know this is hard on you, but we're going to celebrate and do this, right? It may just be that we're going to pick whatever celebration song you want at the end of the day, and we're going to celebrate. And we want to motivate them and celebrate that they don't really change anything in their behavior, but they kind of allow or they just survive us changing what we do with our behavior, right? So even if your kid still cries when they're walking in and you've stopped doing the whole 10 minutes in the car thing, we're still going to celebrate it because they did it and it was a success. Whether they cried or not, they managed to go into the building without needing that extra time from you. So motivation can be really huge. And then expand from there, right? So if you're decreasing one accommodation, you can decrease it more, right? Or you can decrease a different accommodation. But expanding on that, and then they'll kind of know the plan, and that one should be easier, right? So we'll talk a little bit about so statements of support. I do want to give you guys a little time for questions. Instead of giving so much reassurance, because that's a big problem that I see with all kinds of anxieties. I want you to have a new mantra, and that is do less, say less, right? We're always going to be empathetic. We're always going to be caring for our children, but sometimes we just say too much. We're telling them way too much about why they're okay. And we can tell them, 10,000 times that school is fun and they're going to be fine when they go there. But the 10,001st time you say it, it's not going to click, right? You've tried it, it hasn't worked. So do less, say less. What you can do is use a statement of support. Number one, acknowledge their feelings. Hey, I know it feels scary to go to school, right? And then state your confidence and their ability to cope, right? It's really more about, I know it's scary to go to school and I know you can handle that feeling, right? Just showing that you're confident in them. If you show them that you're super anxious and you're doing all these things, juggling all these things to sort of accommodate their anxiety, we're showing them the opposite of confidence. But if you just kind of stop yourself, acknowledge their feelings and show confidence, then they can go from there. They're going to feel anxiety. They're going to want you to say more, right? But those two things go a long way in children who have anxiety of helping them to be seen and to feel your confidence, right? Because we want kids to know it's okay to feel anxious, but you just got to keep going, right? It's very normal to feel anxious, but what their brain is telling them, I'm anxious, so I avoid. And we want their brain to just say, okay, I'm anxious, but I'm going to be okay. Seek help. Okay. So don't kind of put your kids through what we went through as kids. If you were also anxious, where you really just had to figure it out on your own because it took so long and you didn't get the help you needed, right? Therapy is very effective for anxiety. That is one of the reasons it's one of my favorite things to treat, is because when therapy is using evidence-based scientific techniques, it works for anxiety. Anxiety is probably our most treatable thing that we have through psychotherapy. So it's wonderful. Make sure you find a therapist though who's really trained in childhood anxiety. Ask, say, these are my concerns, this is the anxiety that they're having. What methods will you plan to use, right? You want to hear that they're trained in either CBT or SPACE. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a direct intervention where a therapist works with the child, and this is what I was doing before I was using SPACE or trained in SPACE, and now I use both. But CBT is working directly with the child with some parent input and teaching them techniques to manage their anxiety and guiding them through exposures to where they face their anxieties in very planned out ways. It's not you're bringing your kid to therapy and they're just talking about their feelings. That is not going to work. They really need something that is going to involve exposure. SPACE is a parent-based technique. So in SPACE, the therapist works with the parents to learn about anxiety accommodations and to, in a systematic way, decrease these accommodations. And SPACE has actually been shown to be as effective as CBT, which is amazing because CBT forever was our gold standard for anxiety, and we didn't have another method. Another great thing about SPACE is that your kid doesn't have to go to therapy. They may be scared to go to therapy and talk about their feelings. They don't have to go. You don't have to pull them out of school. It's very hard to get times that are after school with a therapist, I can tell you. So you don't have to pull them out of school. You can do it via telehealth and not worry, are they going to pay attention? Are they going to really get anything out of it? SPACE is great, and SPACE can be done in around 8 to 12 sessions, while CBT is typically closer to around 16. And then a medication consult can be had if it's severe, right? So medication does really help with anxiety, especially kids who are very severe. And sometimes using the combination is what a kid needs. A lot of the kids that I work with, I'd say most don't get on medication for their anxiety, and we get to a place where we're really able to address it. But sometimes there's an underlying autism spectrum disorder that we figure out what's going on, and their anxiety is a bit more pervasive, or maybe they have ADHD that we figure out as we go on too, because these things do often overlap, and they're so anxious about school, getting their things done, being forgetful, that sometimes they go on a stimulant and that can help their anxiety, even though stimulants you think of as making people more anxious. So those are the ways that I would recommend you get treatment. Talk to your child's pediatrician. That can be a great first step. There are resources like Psychology Today is a great directory. I post a lot on Instagram, and there's a lot of free content out there. But when we think of kids and anxiety, really make sure that the information that you're consuming is based in science and is not just parenting fluff meant to spark emotions, make you feel guilty, and keep your kids, more attached to you than is healthy, right? Because we want healthy attachment. That is 100%, but we want secure attachment and the absence of an anxiety disorder. Okay, so here is just my Instagram, and I highlighted in green where the links are. So I do work with families, but right there too, another thing I wanted to point out is I have a free parent's guide to childhood anxiety. And it really is filled with all of this information. It's and expanded, right? So it has statements of support, but it has examples of them, and it has the anxiety accommodations, and it has the book by Dr. Leibowitz, and it has resources and it has myths. So if you take anything of this, or if this is helpful, please click on that link and at least get the parents guide. If you're interested in working together, I can see clients across 42 states. I am starting to get pretty booked, so I may start a group soon. If you want to message me and say, hey, if you start a group, let me know, because SPACE is a great program to use for groups. Then that would be great too, because starting groups, it's a lot to recruit, and I haven't needed to yet, but I'm close. So if you're interested, just send me a message. But if anyone has questions, again, this is just for educational purposes. So any general questions, feel free to either like unmute and ask or ask in the chat, and I'll be here for a couple minutes. But thank you all for being here. And I hope that this has been helpful. What about babies under 12 months? Yes, so you're going to see some separation anxiety in babies under 12 months. I'm wondering what sort of the question is. I would say it's hard to know if it's going to be problematic, but I think knowing this information can help you to know, hey, it's okay to go and get my nails done and leave them with a babysitter. So she only wants to be held by mom and dad. Yeah. So I think it's time, you can start practicing that she's held by others, right? And it can help if you're not within the presence, right? So if you're in the room, then she's only going to want to be held by you, right? Doing things like the other people making it really fun for her, kind of distracting her when she goes to the other caregiver, or them having like some kind of really cool toy, or like a teether that she wants, like one of those little snack teethers, or something to motivate. But know that separation, once we pass over she starts, yeah, so knowing that separation is scary, and that can be normal, but I think hopefully knowing information about how we accommodate and how that kind of makes it worse can be helpful. But I think a general tip is when we're around, it makes it harder for them, right? And you probably see that at school sometimes, where the child is dropped off, and the teachers say, oh, they're fine, but you have to leave to get to that point, right? So when we notice that separation anxiety is occurring, a lot of times our go-to is avoiding separations, right? We don't hire a babysitter, we don't go out, we don't do any of these things because our kid's anxious. And knowing that, kids do pretty quickly, oftentimes with this, quote unquote typical separation anxiety, do get over it pretty quickly if we stop the accommodations or limit them. Good question. Oh, good. I'm glad that was helpful. I'm telling you, for my own daughter, walking in was cool. And I noticed at her preschool last year, all the kids, it was like their first preschool experience, and they were all screaming. I mean, I was like, this is so bad. This is My poor daughter is just gonna hear screams all day. But all the parents were carrying them in, and I let the teacher know. I said, oh, it really helped our daughter when we made her start kind of walking in, because she had already been to school. And she actually let all the parents know. She was like, why don't you let your kids walk in? So good. I'm glad that was a helpful tip, because I don't really see that one shared a lot. And it, for us, has been very helpful. And I've seen it be helpful for other kids too when I recommend that. Any other questions or thoughts? Some things while everyone's quiet, if you're interested in like some things that I sort of try to do with my own 7-year-old to promote some independence, or like letting her go and order at a counter at like a quick service restaurant by herself. Letting kids go to the bathroom by themselves when they're capable, letting them, walk to a neighbor's, play in the front yard without us once they get old enough. Little things like that. So even though we don't really, I wouldn't say we experience separation anxiety anymore, there are some things that I try to be aware of that our kids are a lot more capable of than we give them credit for. So just little things like that can go a long way too. Anything else? I'll give like another minute, but Anything else? You've got me. A couple of other, I'll share this randomly too. A couple of other Instagrams that are really good for childhood anxiety are Childhood Empowered and Parenting the Anxious Child. Those are two, they're trained in space, they're very good. They offer a lot of helpful tips. I know Childhood Empowered offers groups in California, which is somewhere that I can't see clients, and Parenting the Anxious Child. She has a membership now too. So is it possible for separation anxiety to occur only at night? Yeah, bedtime struggles, we see a lot of those, right? So with bedtime struggles, I would say kind of make small goals. With bedtime, I always let parents know, don't make a change until you're really ready to implement it. And some of even my therapy clients, they've got a lot going on, and I'm like, let me know when you're ready for a bedtime plan. But you really have to be consistent with these plans. And it's hard to be consistent because sometimes we're half asleep, right? So it is possible that sometimes it's only at night. It could be that it's other times too, but it could be that the kids maybe hiding it or allowing it, but not really saying their feelings. But slow and gradual decrease in accommodations at night with some motivation. Maybe it's a point system where they earn rewards for staying in their room. I've done like bedtime exit tickets where the kid gets a couple tickets, and anytime they exit the room, they have to give one to parent. But as many tickets they save, they earn a reward. Those work really well, the exit tickets. How do you help kids whose parents are going through a divorce when the kids struggle to leave one of the parents' homes to spend time with other parent? Yeah, so I do have some clients that experience this, right? And I will say, when a kid's parents are actively going through a divorce, this transitional time is going to be difficult, right? It's kind of like when we moved to Japan. It's so different, and it's going to be difficult, right? And we're going to see some changes in their anxiety, et cetera. I would probably kind of parent them based on the level of support you feel like they need. But if the transition period feels like it's over and the struggle is really real, get more help. And again, just looking at those accommodations, seeing what's going on, right? Seeing if, sometimes I've seen like the child will just call the parent incessantly when they're at the other parent's house, and the parent always picks up right away, right? So the change in your behavior, like the quick change, could just be, I'm not going to answer the phone unless I'm able to answer the phone. I'm not going to have my phone on me all the time, because that's something I'm doing based on their anxiety. I'm not going to answer on the first ring just because of their anxiety. So always being aware that transitions are going to be difficult. Kids are, only going to be able to handle so much distress, and in these transition times their distress is already higher. So it could be totally normal once the transition occurs. And if you feel like you're accommodating a ton, I would, try to decrease accommodations in general as much as you feel is appropriate. But this, I think a lot of this is kind of specific to the situation too, and seeking help is always a good thing, right? Always having like a support person that you can say, hey, they did this, should I do this? Or okay, let's see. Daughter's 14 months and she's great with my parents, seeks them out, but will scream when my father-in-law tries to hold her or even comes in close proximity. Try giving him a fun toy. Okay, so if a kid is kind of having this, reaction with one person, it could be something like totally weird. Like it could be that he has a beard that she doesn't like, or something like that. But in general, I would say not taking your child back right when they scream, or we don't want to like force we don't want to force her to be held by him really. But you know if you know that your child is with a safe adult, right? Like it's okay to have them, oh, they're going to play together, right? It's okay to have him sort of babysit in a way. Maybe you just go take a walk like around the block, and he has really fun stuff. I mean, I am not against someone having like a lollipop. I mean, people have different views on that, right? But something that really associates your father-in-law with like more fun and more of a positive thing that's negating whatever this like negative thing is. So, and I'm not a fan of like forcing kids to be held by everyone. But what accommodations are we making is kind of the question, right? Hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Do babies outgrow separation anxiety naturally by a certain age? So that's a really good question, right? And if someone has a baby, I'm not really very concerned yet about babies because it takes learning and it takes exposure to separation to outgrow it. And the answer is they basically typically do because they are exposed to it. And it's really not to it really isn't by a certain age. It's often more based on their experiences, right? So if a baby starts daycare very young, they're going to outgrow their separation anxiety a lot earlier, right? But it's okay if a kid doesn't go to daycare, right? If you give them other opportunities to be exposed to separating and their positive experiences, right? Then they are going to also sort of outgrow that, right? And babies don't need to be in daycare. They're not going to develop separation anxiety disorder if they're not going to daycare right away. Or sometimes I have parents who are, they feel terrible and they feel so guilty because they feel like they've made this happen or they should have put their kid in preschool, and guilt doesn't really go anywhere, right? And the fact is that the kid just hasn't had as many experiences. They may need more experiences, right? And I'm not as concerned about, how much time it's been, but more of let's give the kid the experiences that they need. And babies, I'm really not typically worried about separation anxiety in a baby unless it seems so extreme, like so extreme. And there's other things that play too. So that's a good question, but it's probably more based on the amount of experiences and exposure than the age. Hopefully those answers were helpful. It's a lot. There's so much nuance in parenting and in psychology, which is really why there are professionals out here who really want to help and educate. So I would like to thank you all for coming because this is, I mean, it's a great step on helping your kids. And it's really, I think, taking the initiative to learn more and to get more information and maybe be ready for the next step of getting some type of therapy services, or maybe just understanding, hey, like this is what's going on with my kid. And these are some, very easy things that we can do. So yeah, so thank you all for being here, and feel free to follow me at It's Dr. Hannah on Instagram and get that free guide because it's good. So bye everyone.